Welcome to those of you here in person and those of you joining us virtually. My name is Courtney Kaysen-Mann. I'm an audiologist here at Presbyterian Ear Institute. This is the third session of our audiology series. Today we are going to be focusing on tinnitus, triggers, and masking tools. Tinnitus, pronounced tinnitus or tinnitus, takes many different forms. The word tinnitus is derived from the Latin word tinere, which means to ring. Some people describe it as ringing, while others describe it as a buzzing, hissing, roaring, humming, etc. Tinnitus is the perception of sound that does not actually have an external source. If tinnitus does not have an external source, how do we know it exists? Currently, surveys say that 10 to 25% of adults have tinnitus. This means that this percentage of people have found their tinnitus bothersome enough that they have reported it to a medical professional. The medical field as a whole is confident that this percentage is much higher. Most people who have tinnitus have some degree of hearing loss, and their tinnitus is rarely a symptom of something more significant. The caveats to this statement are pulsatile tinnitus, meaning that your tinnitus matches your heartbeat, tinnitus that is only present in one ear, or tinnitus that is accompanied by vertigo. If your tinnitus meets any of these three criteria, you should be evaluated by an ear, nose, and throat doctor. What are common causes of tinnitus? Hearing loss is the most common cause. Noise exposure can cause both short and long-term tinnitus. Certain medications can cause tinnitus, and in some cases changing the dosage or stopping these medications can alleviate tinnitus symptoms. However, you should not stop or change dosage of any prescription medication without consulting the medical professional who prescribed that medication. If you believe that your medication may be the cause, you can look for side effects like ototoxicity, hearing loss, or tinnitus in the side effects listed with your medication description. One of the most user-friendly websites is called drugs.com. Earwax and ear infections can cause temporary tinnitus, and head and neck injuries can cause tinnitus, especially if there has been damage to the structures of the ear, hearing nerve, or to the brain. These are some less common causes of tinnitus. Meniere's disease is a diagnosis that typically includes hearing loss, vertigo, and low-pitch roaring tinnitus. Hearing loss and tinnitus may only take place in one ear. This diagnosis must be made by an ear, nose, and throat doctor. Jaw problems, such as TMJ, can cause tinnitus by putting pressure on the nerves that run along the ear and jaw space. Vestibular schwannomas are benign tumors that grow along the auditory nerve. They may cause hearing loss, tinnitus, and/or vertigo. High blood pressure or malformations in the blood vessels can cause pulsatile tinnitus, and chronic conditions like those listed here can cause tinnitus as the body shifts and changes and as medications are adjusted. These are diagnoses that should be discussed with your care team and/or an ear, nose, and throat doctor if tinnitus becomes a concern. Now let's get into more of the nitty-gritty. If tinnitus is a perceived sound, where does it take place? Tinnitus does not take place in the ears. It is simply perceived in the ears because that is where we are used to sound coming from. Tinnitus takes place in the auditory cortex and the limbic system, and we're going to explore this more in depth as we work through some of the history and research that has gone into understanding tinnitus. Humans have been reporting tinnitus for thousands of years. The earliest writings of tinnitus date back to the ancient Egyptians. They documented a bewitched humming of the ears. They described various substances like frankincense, tree sap, and oils that they would administer to the ear via reed stalk to try to resolve the ringing and buzzing in their ears. Later, the Mesopotamians documented a singing of the ears. We have songs or chants on clay tiles depicting individuals asking the gods to relieve their symptoms. The early Greco-Romans were the first to associate tinnitus with an illness. If a person was diagnosed with a cold, they would recommend cleaning the ear and holding your breath until a humor froths from it. Some years later, Hippocrates and Aristotle recommend masking for tinnitus. They write, "Why is it that the buzzing in the ear ceases if one makes a sound? Is it because a greater sound drives out the less?" This theory has continued on into today's research. In the Middle Ages, medical practice took a bit of a turn. The Welsh people document putting hot bread in the ear to make a person suffering perspire. The person was then instructed to pray for the intervention of God for a cure. During the Renaissance, we have our first documented surgery, as scientists thought that tinnitus was due to wind being trapped in the mastoid cavity. A hole would be drilled into the mastoid to allow the trapped wind to escape. We then jump to the 19th century. Jean-Marc Gaspard-Itard was the first to directly link tinnitus with hearing loss and prescribe masking to his patients as a form of relief. Finally, we make it to the 1980s. In 1981, 414 patients underwent various inner ear surgeries, including complete auditory nerve excisions. 40% of these patients reported an improvement in their tinnitus, while the remaining 60% reported that their tinnitus stayed the same or got worse. It was during this study that we documented tinnitus becoming worse with a complete absence of sound. In 2011, research came out of UC Berkeley explaining that tinnitus takes place in the auditory cortex, not in the ear. The researchers in this group explained that the hair cells in the ear are tuned to specific frequencies. When these hair cells stop sending frequency-specific information to the brain, the neurons in the auditory cortex, who are waiting to receive these frequency-specific signals, start generating phantom perceptions. These neurons in the auditory cortex must keep their same firing rate no matter what. Thus, these phantom perceptions are what we perceive as tinnitus. This phenomena is very similar to phantom limb syndrome that amputees experience. Now that we know how tinnitus is caused, are there proposed solutions? Xiaowen Bao proposed retraining the brain. Bao explained that the brain needs to receive enhanced responses at frequencies around the affected area to alleviate these phantom perceptions. The trick here is documenting exactly what frequency a person's tinnitus is taking place at and how to get those enhanced signals to the brain. He also proposed creating a medication that can inhibit the spontaneous firings of these idle neurons. Again, the trick is figuring out how to target such a small area without affecting the surrounding areas, and altering the medication if the system habituates. How does the limbic system play into tinnitus? Functional MRIs have indicated that the auditory cortex and the limbic system are linked in patients with tinnitus. Research-based fMRIs have shown that tinnitus can cause changes in areas involved in the brain with emotional regulation. This primarily takes place in individuals who are negatively impacted by their tinnitus and who have failed to acclimate to it. The amygdala, which houses our fight or flight response, is activated, and we start to associate emotional memories with our tinnitus, which then causes a sustained level of hypervigilance. In other words, our fight or flight response stays on, which leads to poorer sleep, high stress, and high cortisol levels. What are things that can change or alter our tinnitus? Changes in stress, increased anxiety, poor sleep, increases in sodium and caffeine intake of alcohol, tobacco, and drugs, and certain medications can cause tinnitus to change both in loudness and in pitch. If you are in a place where you are exploring your tinnitus and things that alter its presentation, these are things that you may want to keep an eye on. However, it is highly recommended to not fixate on your tinnitus, as this stimulates the amygdala and can increase the volume of your tinnitus on its own. What are some next steps? We always recommend having your hearing evaluated by an audiologist. We've established today that in a majority of cases, tinnitus is a symptom of hearing loss. If it is appropriate, your audiologist will prescribe hearing aids. Many people experience an alleviation in tinnitus when wearing prescription hearing aids. Many devices now also have the option to add in a tinnitus masking program as well. Healthy masking tools are also recommended. This could be something like a fan or a sound machine to help implement good sleep patterns. Exercise helps improve blood flow and can help regulate stress and sleep patterns. Monitor diet and medications for changes in tinnitus. And, if we haven't said it enough, try to keep a regular sleep schedule to minimize your body's fight or flight response to tinnitus. In cases where people suffer from moderate to severe tinnitus, tinnitus retraining therapy may be recommended. TRT focuses on tinnitus counseling. It teaches patients about their tinnitus and focuses on sound enrichment. This process can alter the way that you react to tinnitus and create healthier emotional patterns to remove yourself from that state of hypervigilance. Lanier is a device that was just approved by the FDA in March of 2023. Lanier uses a dual-mode stimulation. You wear a stainless steel mouthpiece with electrodes that stimulate the tongue. You do this while listening to headphones that play a series of tones and ocean waves. This dual-mode approach desensitizes people to the perceived noise that their tinnitus creates. This program requires 1 hour of use per day for 12 weeks. It currently has an out-of-pocket cost of $4,000, but we're hoping that as it gains traction, it may start to be offered through insurance. You can learn more on Lanier's website and through this feature that NPR published earlier this year. There are some free options as well. These are 2 apps that have had really great success. Neuromonics Tinnitus Treatment is an app that can be downloaded. This is a personalized platform. There are a series of questions that you'll be walked through during setup. They then make personalized recommendations based off of those responses. Relief by Resound is a platform that has several dozen different masking tools. You can create combinations that work specifically for you, or you can use popular combinations that are recommended. These can be played both through your phone speaker or streamed through your hearing aids. The idea behind Relief by Resound is that it keeps you out of those quiet spaces where tinnitus is the loudest. There are a few things that you've likely seen on the internet as you've researched how to cure my tinnitus. These are all correlational, not causational. If you have low B12, your tinnitus may be louder. Speak to your doctor about your B12 levels. If your levels are corrected, your tinnitus may reduce in volume. The same goes for vitamin C. Melatonin is correlational with poor sleep. If you get better sleep, your tinnitus may decrease in volume. If your body is out of alignment and you see a chiropractor, you may notice that your tinnitus changes in volume or pitch. These aren't bad things to try or look into, but don't feel disappointed if you try them and your tinnitus isn't cured. Again, they're correlational, not causational. Lastly, you are not alone. There are support groups for individuals with tinnitus. American Tinnitus Association and IDA Institute have great resources and links for where to find support. If you need medical support, please reach out to a professional. Thank you so much for joining us today. Our last session for this series will take place on August 30th. This will look at hearing loss, device use, and cognition. And stay tuned for our next list of topics.